"This is a new day," General Henry Hap Arnold declared to the members of the Senate Military Affairs Committee. The date was October 19, 1945, and the commanding general of the then Army Air Forces was testifying on the importance of legislating a new national security organization that would feature an independent Air Force. General Arnold's masterful opening statement to the committee portrayed in microcosm the history and impact of air power, culminating with the Army Air Force's contribution to the great victory in World War II. Yes, we'll talk more about this guy later. Hint, he is part of something that rhymes with a me-facin'. A large part of this story was not pretty. The history of the 20th century had found the U.S. unprepared for successive military crises. Each new crisis, General Arnold emphasized, has found our armed services far from effectively, efficiently, or economically organized. With each crisis, modernization and coordination have been hammered out under war pressure at great waste of resources, and allowed in large measure to lapse when the crisis is over. General Arnold pointed to the predicament of the Army Air Corps in the years before World War II. Prior to the entry of the United States into World War II, this contentious issue between the Air Corps and the War Department tended to resolve itself under the pressure of aggression fomented by totalitarian nations. President Franklin Roosevelt in early 1939 directed an enormous expansion of aircraft production. General Arnold, who had succeeded the late General Oscar Westover in September 1938 as Chief of the Air Corps, immediately activated his ties to the aircraft industry. The result was the start of enormous air power mobilization for war. Roosevelt's ambitious aircraft production goal during World War II sparked a humorous yet serious warning from Assistant Secretary of War for Air, Robert A. Lovett, who likened the task to asking a hen to lay an ostrich egg. Despite the improbability, General Arnold saw the merit in aiming high, willing to accept the strain it would put on the system. As Nazi Germany advanced through Europe, Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall and Secretary of War Henry Stimson supported granting the Air Force a degree of autonomy to strengthen the Army's air capabilities. This led to the establishment of the Army Air Forces in June 1941, which achieved significant autonomy by March 1942. General Arnold, with a vision for a post-war independent Air Force, established planning groups within an Army Air Force headquarters. His advisory council, created shortly after Pearl Harbor, focused on organizational concepts for a post-war Air Force. This council included key officers. When their proposals were initially rejected by General Marshall, Arnold emphasized the importance of not just developing ideas, but also effectively presenting them. He also formed the Special Projects Office in 1945 to coordinate post-war planning with the War Department General Staff. During the war, Arnold prioritized identifying capable officers for future command and planning roles, bringing General Lawrence Cooter and General Loris Norstad into key positions. Cooter was appointed Assistant Chief of Air Staff Plans, while Norstad took charge of the B-29 bomber production and later played a crucial role in planning for an independent Air Force. By May 1945, Arnold assigned Cooter and Norstad to significant roles in the Pacific and post-war planning, respectively. After World War II, Generals Arnold and Eisenhower emphasized the need for unity of command, advocating for an autonomous air element co-equal with land and naval forces. This concept was essential for effective military operations and planning. In 1946, General Spaatz, with Eisenhower's support, established 3 major combat air commands, furthering the structure needed for an independent Air Force. Arnold's vision of co-equal services land, sea, and air became a legislative goal to ensure effective military coordination and operational success. The cost was a concern. That was short-lived, which is why we'll fast forward a bit in this story, shall we? The National Security Act of 1947 essentially created the Air Force. It read in part, "In general, the United States Air Force shall include aviation forces, both combat and service not otherwise assigned. It shall be organized, trained, and equipped primarily for prompt and sustained offensive and defensive air operations. The Air Force shall be responsible for the preparation of the air forces necessary for the effective prosecution of war except as otherwise assigned and, in accordance with integrated joint mobilization plans, for the expansion of the peacetime components of the Air Force to meet the needs of war. The Air Force have served in the following conflicts: both World Wars, the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the 1980 Iranian hostage rescue, the 1983 U.S. invasion of Grenada, the 1986 U.S. bombing of Libya, the 1989 through 1990 U.S. invasion of Panama, the Gulf War, the 1995 NATO bombing in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Afghanistan War, Iraq War, and a few others. You may not have heard of all of their badass equipment, so let's just tell you about it. A-10C Thunderbolt, A-29 Super Tucano, AC-130J Ghost Rider, OA-1K Skywarden, the B-1, B-2, and B-52 bombers, the Sea Transport Fleet that includes, but is not limited to, the C-130 and CV-22 Osprey. The E-F and H inventory is quite spectacular too. This includes planes like the E-9A Widget, the F-16 Fighter, and the H-C Combat King. But these all need fuel, right? That is where the tankers come in. In addition to these, they have observation planes, reconnaissance planes, gliders, and even Air Force One. Not the shoes by Nike. We are talking the President's Taxi. Before we talk about the Freemasons, here are some famous Air Force vets. First off, Chuck Norris. Chuck served from 1958 to 1962. Morgan Freeman, the sexy-voiced actor, served as a radar repairman from 1955 to 1959. Roy Scheider. You know him from the Jaws movies. He served as a first lieutenant from 1955 to 1958. If you've noticed, all three of the first guys could have crossed paths during their service, but only if Chuck Norris said it was okay. Tom Skerritt. You know him as Maverick's Top Gun instructor from the iconic 80s movie. Tom served from 1951 to 1955 as a classification specialist. I don't know what that means either, brothers. Johnny Cash. Cash joined in 1950 and was assigned to an intelligence unit because of his talent with Morse code. Willie Nelson. Good old Willie joined after high school, but was discharged 9 months later after he developed back problems. It is unclear if it was related to the large amounts of marijuana he was used to loading on his tour bus. Now to the Freemasons. If you'll go back to the beginning of the piece, General Hap Arnold. He was a Freemason. That's right, gents. The founder of the Air Force was a Freemason. He was a member of Union Lodge No. 7 in Kansas City, Kansas. He is also the only person to ever hold the rank of 5-star general in 2 branches of military service. After the Air Force was officially formed, he died just 3 years later in 1950. General Carl Spaatz is also reported to be the Freemason. Many verifiable sites mention him as a Freemason, but we have not seen the dates. We have seen Spaatz and Truman in a photo together, both wearing a Masonic apron. Although we could not find anything of General Robert A. Lovett and Freemasonry, we did find that he was part of the 1918 class of Skull and Bones at Yale University. Just 2 years after Prescott Bush, that is Bush one's daddy. Although we show a strong bias on the old-fashioned Masonic podcast to the Army, we respect all branches of service and believe that all current and former members of the armed forces should be held to a high regard. We hope you liked this episode and will continue to comment, like, and subscribe to the old-fashioned Masonic podcast. Disclaimer: the views expressed in this video do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the old-fashioned Masonic podcast, any Grand Lodge or Shrine Center, and we encourage viewers to conduct their research and form their conclusions based on reliable sources and personal beliefs.